The Grenlec Debates, powering bright ideas.
You're watching the 11th season of the Grenlec Debates. Please bear in mind that matches, topics, and positions are randomly selected by schools. The theme for the round of 16 is Grenadian and Caribbean history. I am your chairperson, Rohan Bernard, and I call this house to order. And the motion is, be it resolved that Grenada is an independent nation. The proposition, Westerhall Secondary. The opposition, Bishop's College. Please welcome the first speaker for the proposition.
Mr. Chairman, honorable judges, most accurate timekeeper, colleagues, worthy opponents, good morning. As a member of the proposition, my colleagues and I defend the moot, be it resolved that Grenada is an independent nation. It is with unabashed pride I stand before you all to defend the notion that our beloved island Grenada is indeed an independent nation. As the first speaker, on behalf of the proposition, I will seek to establish the parameters of our stance and to establish definitions that will facilitate the presentation of our arguments. I will also discuss why legally we are an independent nation. Thereafter, my colleague, the second speaker, will present arguments to further convince you that the opposition stance is perhaps borderline treason and that the reality is in fact contrary to what they will try to establish. Firstly, please permit us to utilize Grenada as inclusive of all of our three islands. What does it mean to be independent? According to the Cambridge Online Dictionary, independent means, and I quote, a country that is not governed or ruled by another country, end of quote. According to the Oxford Online Dictionary, a nation is, and I quote, a large body of people united by common descent, history, culture, or language inhabiting a particular state or territory, end of quote. In February of 1974, we were granted our independence from our former colonial master, and a mere 7 months after, we became a recognized member of the United Nations. There are a few steps to becoming a member of the UN. The first is to gain independence. The second, and to us the most telling, is that, and I quote from the United Nations website, any recommendation for admission must receive the affirmative votes of 9 of the 50 members of the Council, provided that none of its 5 permanent members, China, France, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America, have voted against the application. End of quote. My learned opponents, what else do you want? If the hegemonies of the world have acknowledged Grenada as an independent sovereign state, what in goodness name are you waiting on? The United Nations recognized Grenada as independent because, under international law, we fully satisfy the terms of the Montevideo Convention of 1933, which stipulated that all states are equal sovereign units. To be deemed a state, the following characteristics were needed: a permanent population, defined territorial boundaries, a government, and an ability to enter into agreements with other states, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. Further to this, we chose to belong to several other international groups and bodies, including the Commonwealth of Nations, the OECS, and CARICOM. None of these associations were forced upon us. Instead, we opted to belong to these organizations because of the many positives. In closing, to further corroborate the indubitable fact that we govern our own affairs and we are indeed an independent nation, allow me to paraphrase the preamble of our Constitution. It says, "We, the people of Grenada, in this solemn exercise of our sovereign constituent power, do hereby reenact and ordain the Constitution of Grenada in order to secure for ourselves the rights and freedoms that are constitutive of the moral ideal of human dignity, to provide and promote good democratic governance of our tri-island state and for the general welfare of all our people." Worthy judges, astute opponents, this is our resolute document, our Holy Grail. The Constitution comprises our laws to govern our land. We are ultimately responsible for our people. Together we aspire, together we achieve. We are and will continue to be an independent nation. I thank you.
The first speaker for the opposition.
And so it happened, February 7th, 1974, under the leadership of Sir Eric Matthew Gerry. Our new flag was raised, signaling nationhood for the state of Grenada. Gerry said that this day established Grenada as, and I quote, fully and completely liberated, free and independent, unquote. Is Grenada really independent? There is irrefutable evidence that Grenada is not an independent nation. We, the opposition, affirm that in an era of globalization, it is a glaring fallacy for any nation to speak of independence, but rather that of interdependence. As first speaker, I will establish why, after 44 years, Grenada can only boast of partial political independence. My second speaker will give incontrovertible proof that we are economically interdependent and culturally influenced. Our third and fourth speaker will cross-examine and rebut respectively. We accept our opponent's definition of nation, but refute that of independent. The Cambridge Dictionary defines independent as not influenced or controlled in any way by other people, events, or things. In many ways, this definition dismisses the status of Grenada as an independent nation and raises the question of, what then did we gain in 1974? The answer lies in our history, dating back to 1763, when Britain first took over from France. Our independence supposedly marked the end of colonialism and gaining political sovereignty, which gives a nation complete power, especially to determine its own course of action. It is on this premise that we assert that only partial political independence was gained in 1974. According to a 2010 document, redrafting the Grenada Constitution on the Government of Grenada website, I quote, "The people are the active creators of their constitutional order, writing the fundamental laws by which they are to be governed. If, however, the democratic constitution is produced by a previous imperial power, it will forever bear the taint of illegitimacy," unquote. It is then fair to say that Grenada fell short of the ideal of a true constitution, one which was never debated in Parliament before being adopted. Our constitution mirrors British society and its norms. Even more ironic is Chapter 4, Section 57 of the Grenada Constitution of 1973, which states that, and I quote, "The executive authority of Grenada is vested in Her Majesty," unquote. Chapter 2, Section 19 of the aforementioned source states clearly that she will be represented by the Governor General. Now tell me, opponents, why should the Queen of the country from which we gained our independence be represented in our nation, let alone be head of state? Do we still owe allegiance to Great Britain? This is quite contradicting, especially when the representatives elected by the people in general elections, in taking the oath of allegiance, must pledge to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to Schedule 3 of the Constitution. What absolute absurdity. Added to this, our prison is named Her Majesty's Prison, the Grenada Police Force deemed royal, and if that's not enough, court appeals are versus the Queen. Judges, the Queen is more acclaimed than our own national icons. This is colonial mentality that trivializes the arduous struggle of our people for independence. Solidifying our stance is the fact that the Privy Council is our final appellate court. Dr. Lawrence Joseph, attorney at law, wrote in the article, "The Role of the Privy Council, September 2013, and I quote, "One reason for considering the CCJ as final court of appeal is to complete the independence of the Caribbean," unquote. Judges, in attaining independence, a country has total control over its internal and external affairs within its three arms of government. So why does the final say of the judiciary lie in a body outside of Grenada? The apparent reality is that the United Kingdom still has control and influence. Independence is a work in progress and must not be seen as an event, but a journey, with 1974 being a significant step in the right direction. However, until the umbilical cord of the United Kingdom is completely severed, we cannot unequivocally say that we are truly independent from the clutches of our colonial master. I thank you.
The second speaker for the proposition.
Good morning. We do not accept the definitions put forward by the opposition and will prefer to maintain our stance with our definitions. My job is to drive the nail in the proverbial coffin, performing the last rites on anyone who supports or promotes the notion that Grenada is not an independent nation. Mr. Chairman, how can we even entertain such a notion? Grenada, not an independent nation? Good heavens! Yes, we have our limitations and challenges. Who doesn't? Which man is an island? In order to hammer our points home, allow me to utilize this analogy. Worthy judges, some of you are currently repaying mortgage and or vehicular loans. You relied on the financial institutions to assist you in owning some of what you have. Does that question or compromise your independence? Clearly it doesn't. Human beings of their own volition enter into agreements with different entities. This freedom to choose is at the core of the concept of independence. Now, let's transfer this concept back to nations. Our worthy opponents may argue that we are indebted to several countries and are reliant on loans and grants. We concur. However, we vehemently submit that this in no way discredits our independent status. As a country, we exercise our rights to seek loans and assistance just like independent adults do. The only difference is that we seek aid from other sovereign states and international financial institutions. Every country relies on assistance from other countries. We all contribute to the development of each other. Argentina, for example, has recently requested a $50 billion loan from the IMF amid severe economic crisis. The great United States of America is $1.18 trillion in debt to China. Would you conspire to question their independence now? As realists, my team will not stand here and obstinately deny facts. We accept that our little island is indeed reactive to what occurs in some countries. As the old adage expressed by Flying Turkey Calypso says, bigger nations sneeze and we catch the flu. Considering our numerous challenges as a small nation, this is no surprise. Furthermore, we should not allow our opponents to persuade us into forgetting the immense sacrifices and efforts our people continue to make to help preserve our national heritage. How can we allow our opponents to even remotely tamper with the elation we felt when Kirani James claimed gold at the Olympics? Wasn't it a proud feeling to be known as a Grenadian then, as opposed to a British subject? Yes, my worthy opponents, prior to our independence, the British Nationality Act of 1948 stipulated that we were legally called British subjects. Thank God for independence. We must not allow fancy rhetoric to skew the very vision we have of our beloved nation. The limitations and challenges we face do not compromise our independence. Instead, it only serves as an impetus for a continued quest for betterment. Hail Grenada, land of furs. I rest my case.
The second speaker for the opposition.
Worthy opponents, in an ever-changing world heavily influenced by globalization, Grenada is far from being economically independent, but rather interdependent. According to Pierre Perec, Why the Developing World Hates World Bank, issue 11, 2002, and I quote, although colonialism in the form of direct government rule has ended, the vast economic power of the industrialized world allows it to control the developing world by forcing them to accept free market capitalism. A fiction in a world with closed borders, skewed playing field, and the military might of the West. The World Bank has forced many developing nations to rewrite laws dealing with issues such as trade, budgets, labor, the environment, and healthcare. End of quotes. In our local context, as with many other Caribbean countries, we are drowning in debt. As printed in the Quarterly Public Debt Bulletin of March 2017, compiled by the Debt Management Unit of Ministry of Finance, Grenada, Grenada's debt stands at a whopping $2.6 billion. Judges, as recent as 2017, our importation of goods stood at $1.1 billion in comparison to an export figure of $17 million. Can you guess the deficit, worthy opponents? $983,000 million. In this modern era, after 44 years of supposed independence, debt has skyrocketed because we have no industries to help lessen the brunt of borrowing and purchase of food and other amenities needed. Honorable judges, opponents, globalization is believed to be accompanied by cultural intermixing, creating a fear that the appreciation of Caribbean heritage is being eroded as youth are gravitating towards cultures of North America and Europe. Ferguson and Bernstein in the journal Remote Acculturation of Early Adolescence in Jamaica Towards European American Culture 2012 conceptualized the orientation as a modern type of acculturation occurring across distance, which they termed remote acculturation. A report of the CARICOM Commission on Youth Development, January 2010, cited a reason for this as, and I quote, failure of post-colonial Caribbean societies to deliver economic security, unquote. Former Canadian Prime Minister Kim Campbell observed that images of America are so pervasive in this global village that it is almost as instead of the world immigrating to America, America has emigrated to the world, allowing people to aspire to be Americans even in distant countries, but in 1998. Evidence of American and European cultures is pervasive in the food we eat, music we listen to, the clothes we wear, and the types of news and movies we view. The media is perceived as the means through which our youth are being socialized and able to remotely participate in U.S. culture. Honorable judges, we now boast of giant franchises as KFC and Payless in Grenada. Are we losing our cultural identity? The loss of cultural identity is the greatest defeat a nation can know, and it is inevitable under globalization. Worthy opponents, Judge Bernard Shaw rightly posited independence as, and I quote, independence? That's middle-class blasphemy. We are all dependent on one another, every soul of us on earth. End of quote. I thank you.
The opposition cross-examiner.
Worthy opponent, can you tell me a country in the world that is independent?
It is claimed that Australia is an independent country, and as we stated, our hegemony is America is also an independent country.
But let me remind you that America relies on other countries for their sustenance. They import cars, they import food. They don't have all the resources in a country. Let me finish, please. They don't have all the resources in a country to feed the nation. They are interdependent because they're relying on other countries for their sustenance.
Independence is a choice for the opponent. It is not about the numbers of imports and exports we have. It is a choice.
For the opponent, you are mixing up the meaning of independence. As stated in the Cambridge Dictionary, it means not influenced or controlled in any way by other people, events, or things.
But is America influenced by other countries?
Of course, I just said they import cars.
That is
all the bills are not made in America.
Imports. That is not their influence, or the influence.
You are mixing up
countries.
Developed countries with independent countries with the opponent. Let's move on to the next question. In an era of globalization, can you say that our country, or any country for that matter, is economically, culturally, or politically independent?
We are culturally independent because we contribute to, we have our own Juve. Does America have Juve? Does Canada have Juve? Does England have Juve?
What opponent?
But isn't it something
you cannot say that Grenada is independent. The food we eat, the music we listen to, the news we watch, they're not Grenadian, Grenada.
You also stated that America imported stuff, but isn't Grenada, does that make America not independent?
Well, the opponent's culture is influenced by other countries in Grenada because we adopt things from other nations, we are influenced by other nations. Where did hip-hop come from?
Grenada is a mixture of different cultures. We're mixed with African,
Where did
Indian,
hip-hop come
and
from?
Also, it came down from
Well,
America,
opponent,
but isn't
every aspect of our culture, you must see an influence from another country in Grenada.
But isn't America also
Let's move on, please,
influenced by
with the
other
opponent.
country?
In 1983, Grenada had a coup which led to the US invading Grenada to bring peace and stability. Isn't that a form of political independence? Interdependence, sorry.
Repeat?
But the opponents, in 1983, Grenada had a coup which led in the US invading Grenada to bring peace and stability. Isn't that a form of political independence? Interdependence?
Yes, but wasn't America also interdependent on the smaller countries when they were affected by hurricanes?
Isn't that a form of interdependence? Exactly, you are profounding my point. Grenada cannot stand on its own feet. We need intervention from other countries'
but
influence
America is
to
also
bring
an
Grenada on the feet.
independent nation, but
Imagine
does that
this for the
mean that they are
opponent. Grenada is headed by England, the Queen. England is like our mother. Imagine we're a 44-year-old man still breastfeeding of England.
The proposition cross-examiner.
A few years ago, Grenada ended all diplomatic relations with Taiwan and began new relationships with China. How could this have been possible if Grenada is not an independent nation?
Exactly. We need intervention from China to run our economy. A matter of fact, China is like our father.
But
we get a lot of our funds from China.
But isn't America also import and export rate as high or higher than ours? But why do you say that?
No, it is not even higher. We don't have evidence of that. Do you have evidence of that? Well, the opponent, our import rate is much higher than our export rate because we rely on other countries for our sustenance.
But
we are influenced by other countries.
But the opponent independence
we
is a
even rely on England
choice.
for our sustenance.
Independence is a choice. Since Grenada is part of
We
the
are
CARICOM,
interdependent.
why isn't it mandatory that we adopt the CCJ as our final appellate court? Why are we given the choice?
Well, the opponent, unless we vote yes to the CTJ, the Privy Council
But we were
remains our
given
final
a
court of
choice.
appeal.
We were given
Right
a
now,
choice.
we are interdependent. We have three pillars in the court system: judiciary, legislative, and executive. We only have two in Grenada.
If we are if we aren't
legislative is in
independent,
England.
can you tell me
we have
who is
let me
in
finish
charge
my
of
question,
us?
please. Let me
No,
finish answer the
it
question.
is not your turn. When it
In
was your turn, I
legislative,
answered your question.
we go to
if we
England
aren't an
to
independent
get the
nation,
final
can you tell
court
me
of
who's in
appeal.
charge of us?
Sorry?
If we aren't an independent nation, tell me who is in charge of us.
England is in charge of us. It states in the Constitution,
It is
Chapter 4, Section 57,
England
the
is not
executive
in charge
authority
of
of
us.
Grenada
The
is
British
invested in Her
colony
Majesty.
is just a figurehead of our island. The Queen just
The
seconds.
head, not the figurehead. We
It's
can
just
see in
a
our
figurehead
royal
of
police
what-
force, deemed in Her Majesty, the Queen of England.
The Queen
Tell
just
me, do we owe
seconds what
allegiance
the
to the
Governor
Queen
General says.
or the country or the flag? Thank you for bringing that up. The Governor General is a representative of England in our country.
A
Why should England
representative.
why should England have a say in our matters?
She doesn't have a say. She seconds
The
what he
Queen is
says.
higher than the Governor General in our country.
Do you know of any other country that shares our flag, our anthem, our constitution? Then why aren't we an independent nation? Don't we stand up and out as our own?
Do we owe allegiance to the Queen or the flag or the country? Which one? I think you're mixing up yourself for the opponent.
That is not the question. I asked, do you know of any country that shares our
Our
flag?
head of state is the Queen of England.
That is not the
We
question.
owe allegiance to the
Do you
Queen,
know
not
any
to the
other country
flag.
that shares our flag, our anthem, our constitution? Then
A
aren't
flag
we
is
an
one
independent-
aspect. The
No,
flag doesn't
I
determine if a
listed
country is independent. I'm answering my
have
question. Please understand
we
me.
have our own motto. We also have our own
As my
national
speaker
dish.
stated, independence is a journey. The flag was just one step in getting independence.
But-
that didn't seal the deal of us getting independence.
But
we
it-
still rely on other
It
countries.
was, it was
England is
stated
like our
by
mother,
our
China is like
colonial
our father.
master that we gained independence on February 7th. Isn't that true?
Independence.
The opposition rebuttal speaker.
Honorable judges, my team and I are resolute in our stance that Grenada is not an independent nation. Opponents, your first speaker stated that Grenada is an independent nation because we were given it on February 7th, 1974. But opponents, if we are so independent, why do we have a Governor General who represents the Queen, which is our head of state? Opponents, your second speaker stated that they are Grenadians who embraces our culture, but opponents, they have been continuing their culture, but in every little nook and cranny we go, also we hear is the vulgar words of rapping artists disrespecting each other and women in disgusting ways. Doesn't this go to show that our culture is slowly dwindling and the American culture is vastly coming into stream? Your second speaker clearly fortified our stance that we are interdependent on other countries as also other so-called independent nations. Your POI speaker stated that America is an independent country, but opponents, how can you say that America depends on other countries to import things into their country in order for development to take place and also depend on other countries to purchase their own items to get money for further development for the country? I rest my case.
The proposition rebuttal speaker.
Good morning. My colleagues and I hasten to remind one and all that the moot under debate is whether Grenada is an independent nation and not whether Grenada is interdependent, reliant, or culturally influenced. Being influenced and importing goods does not change the status of our independence. Your first speaker claims that authority lies outside of our country. So why do we have a representation of the Queen in our island? Representative? Your second speaker states that we are drowning in debt. But what about America, who is an independent nation and is $1.18 trillion in debt to China? Mr. Chair, audience, judges, please do not be swayed by the opponent's invalid arguments. I thank you.
And the winner is Bishop's College. Thank you for joining us. Tune in again for Season 11 of the Grenlec Debates. Visit us on Facebook to vote for your favorite debater.
The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas. Vote for your favorite debater on our Facebook page. The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas.